Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Suit Up, the Warframe frame review series. Today we're finishing off Mag Week by finally checking out the frame herself. We looked at augments, but those augments are pointless without the frame. So what are we looking at with the frame? Well, the prime is actually vaulted right now, so the only way to get the prime is in the vaulted relics that you might have saved up, or from trade chat, while the standard frame can be farmed from defeating the sergeant on Phobos. If you get the prime though, you get a frame with very average health. You get 300 at rank 30, second highest shield amount of 450, which is actually tied with a whole bunch of others, a really rather average 150 energy, and a rather low armor amount of just 65. So as you can see, stats wise, she isn't really that impressive. In fact, for a frame that's such a heavy caster like Mag is, that energy, the energy amount is actually surprisingly low. So with her being a caster frame, like I said, let's go over her abilities. Most are fairly straightforward, but some have some serious niches to them. Her first ability, that's Pull, where Mag uses a magnetic field to pull any enemy in range, dealing 300 pure magnetic damage over 25 meters, with any enemies that are actually killed by Pull having a 25% better chance to drop an energy orb. If you try to pull an enemy that is currently being magnetized, Pull will do double damage. All damage numbers and also the drop chance of energy can be increased with power strength mods, and range increased with range mods. All enemies pulled will be ragdolled around quite a bit, but they're not stunned directly, so duration has no effect on this ability whatsoever. There really isn't a lot to talk about with the ability, to be honest. It's a very solid bit of crowd control though. It's really cheap, really spammable, plus the ragdolls can last for quite some time occasionally. So while it doesn't directly stun, it can keep a group of enemies from being able to return fire pretty effectively. And one use that people don't often think of is it can clear out things like Sapping Osprey or AoE things, Mine Osprey mines, or even the grenades that the Grenier like to throw around. So using Pull can be good at clearing those for your team as well. But in general, it's a pretty solid first ability, because once that damage falls off, which it does fairly quickly, you are still going to have crowd control to fall back on. Her second ability is definitely her strongest, and that is Magnetize. It's also got the most to it. Now, like I say, it's quite a bit to this, but basically, Mag's going to create a field over 4 meters around an enemy, and that's going to be for 15 seconds. It's going to pull enemies in, bullets, the shards from Polarize, and that's all going to go into the middle of it. While the field is up, damage from everything is increased by 200%. It will also deal 25% of the absorbed damage per second to all units in the range of the ability. However, if the enemy you cast the ability on is killed, the field will collapse in on itself and will explode at the end of the duration. And that's going to deal 300 pure blast damage in a 15 meter radius. And that 300 is going to be multiplied by 200% of the damage that was absorbed by the field. Now, all multipliers and the explosion damage can be increased with the use of power strength. You've got range with range mods and duration with duration mods. Now, I know that was a lot to mention, however the ability isn't really as difficult as it sounds. The field's going to redirect all fire that's going in its general direction, whether it's enemy or friendly, and it's just going to hit the enemies inside the bubble. What this means that if you wanted to, you could hole yourself up in a little dead end somewhere, just hide behind the bubble since they can't get to you or fire at you, while you put damage into them multiplied by whatever build you've got on the frame. Now, to be honest, to get the best out of the ability, you should really pick the right weapons for it. Mostly projectile-based weapons or weapons with a lot of punch-through. Something like a gas-electric Lanka fired into the bubble with the procs and also the punch-through it has on the shot. That can supercharge the bubble really very quickly. Things like the Pox with its AoE clouds stacked on top of each other. Anything with shred on it. Same with projectile weapons like the Detron Mara. However, there are some little niches all over the place with this. The bubble doesn't stop enemies shooting out of it, but obviously the projectiles won't go out, it will just be absorbed by it. So the ideal situation for you is to use something that can proc radiation. This actually forces the units inside the bubble to fight each other, and that charges the bubble themselves. This sounds obvious, I know, but think of it like this. That's level appropriate damage right there. More often than not, that it's actually going to be more than your own weapon. If you've got level 145 bombards, for example, very, very rare you're going to have that, but still, this is just an example. Each absorbed shot will be a level 145 bombard rocket multiplied by the damage of the bubble, and that effectively gives you an infinitely scaling damage source. You can also have up to 4 magnetized bubbles, so you can either cover multiple angles, cutting off enemies from different areas, or you can stack them inside each other and the damage you put into one bubble is actually transmitted to all of them. This can be a real boost from the damage of this ability and seriously shred some really high level enemies. This ability, it really replaced Polarize as Mag's primary damage dealing ability. It's actually one of the strongest damage dealing abilities in the game. It's fantastic whether you want to hide behind it or inside it, simply playing around the edge of it. It actually helps a lot with her survivability because she's not that survivable otherwise, especially at higher level. It's a fantastic ability, and if you can get good with it, you can hold down choke points, protect the cryopod, whatever you want. It is truly fantastic. Her third ability is Polarize, which used to be her best ability by far. However, it's more of an ability, I would say now, to set up Magnetize. What she does is she'll send out a radial wave that's going to deal 400 damage to both shields and armor. The damage that is caused to an enemy will then be multiplied by 2.5 times and will form a shard on the floor to be picked up by Magnetize. If the damage drains the shield entirely, then it will explode. That will deal 2.5 times the amount of drained shields in a radial explosion as pure magnetic damage, and that has an 8-meter radius of the drained target. Allied shields are also going to be restored by 400 if they're within the wave at any point, even if you don't hit anything with the wave at all. Damage is affected by power strength, the starting range of the wave as well as the explosion radius is affected by range mods, and the duration the wave goes for is affected by duration mods. Honestly, the shield and armor strip falls off rather quickly for me right now. Well, the shield it falls off way less than the armor does. As soon as you put a fixed number on something like Polarize has right now, it immediately causes effectively a hard cap on how far it's going to take you. It's definitely handy to boost up your damage with a quick removal of shields or armor, plus give a sizable damage boost to your Magnetize, but it's definitely a far cry from how good the ability used to be for sure. Her fourth ability is Crush. What Mag does is she will magnetize the bones of her enemies, dealing 1500 pure magnetic damage over 18 meters. Damage is applied over 3 ticks and it deals 1500 additional damage to any enemy that's affected by Magnetize. Crush will also suspend any enemy in the range in the air, with each tick of damage suspending any new enemies that have come into range of the ability. Damage is affected by power strength and range by range mods, and that's almost literally everything I know about this ability. It's super simple. The damage drops off super quickly, however, and, you know, the crowd control works pretty effectively, but I just don't have a lot else to say about it. There is no real specific niche or some way to make this ability better. It just is what it is. She also has a passive ability, which is that when she bullet jumps, she has a mini greedy pull built in effectively. It's just going to pull all items to mag within a certain radius, sort of like Vacuum does. So moving on from her abilities, let's check out the builds for her. The builds this time around come from a good friend of mine, Frozen Balls. You can check out his video on Mag in the description below. He does some awesome content, and he's also now a partner Twitch streamer as well, so massive congrats to Frozen on getting his sub button. So the first build I've got pretty much is the standard build I've been using. There's some small variations though. I've got 4 Former on here, I've got 1D, 1V and 3 Dash in total. Got Corrosive Projection on there, Handspring for knockdown recovery, Stretching Cunning Drift for power range, Blind Rage and Power Drift for power strength, Streamline for a bit of for efficiency, Prime Continuity for power duration, and then Primed Flow for energy storage and Quick Thinking as survivability. This is an extremely energy hungry build and really is going to require an Arcane Energize or Zenuric or both. It's very hard to keep this running, however you could switch out Blind Rage for Transient if you aren't convinced you can keep up with the energy cost. You can even switch out something like Cunning Drift for Shield Transference mod if you want a bit more shield and survivability. I found this to be a very good all-around build for all 4 abilities without sacrificing too much to be able to pull it off. The second build is purely a crowd control build, working with Fractured Crush, which I checked out yesterday. We've got Corrosive Projection on there, Cunning Drift, Stretch and Overextended for range, Constitution, Prime Continuity for duration, Prime Flow for energy storage, Quick Thinking to work with as my survivability, Streamline for a little bit of efficiency. This is a properly solid build for simply stopping enemies in their tracks. You slow down the flow of enemies headed towards any objective that you're guarding, combine this build with a slow Nova for example, and watch them get thrown to the floor by Crush, then take 1,000 years to stand back up again and then frozen in place for the next few seconds. There is some fantastic team composition here that can really help keep the entire world crowd controlled for eternity. It's a very specific build, but it is one that is very effective. So after all of this, what do I actually think of Mag Prime and her skills? Well, to be honest, I think she is a good frame. Her first and second abilities are pretty damn good, especially Magnetize. That ability is one of the strongest abilities in the game. I think that very few people understand just how ridiculously strong that thing is. Whether it's being used defensively as part of Mag's survivability, or whether it's being used offensively to cut off choke points, it's truly a key part of her skill set now. And all her abilities are amplified when enemies are in Magnetize. Polarize is really there to set up the damage from Magnetize. She is one of the few frames in the game though with an infinitely scaling damage ability. But even though Magnetize is strong, I don't feel like I normally do when I do one of these videos. Normally when I do a suit up, I get to know the frame again, know their niches, work out what I find fun about them all over again. But I just didn't do that with Mag at all. I don't know what it is, but her other 3 abilities feel kind of underwhelming. Okay, that's a little harsh, I do like Pull. But Polarize and Crush just don't fill me with much love whatsoever. The shield shredding of Polarize does feel okay, but the armor shredding amount just feels far too small for it to be worth trying to remove all armor from enemies. The only thing I really think it's good for is charging the damage on Magnetize with the shards that it creates. And then Crush, I just don't even with that ability. The only good thing about it is the crowd control, and even that without the augment is actually pretty weak. An ability that costs 100 energy, when the damage falls off pretty much by the time the star map's done, and the crowd control, which is definitely its best feature, is nothing more than the enemy falling onto the floor and standing back up again and carrying on as if nothing happened. While Mag is completely rooted to the spot and vulnerable, unable to move. I also feel that for a caster frame, her energy pool is just simply too low. I just don't understand how that wasn't increased when her rework happened. But you know what? While I know that some people are really going to like Mag and her skill set, I'm just not feeling it at all. Although, I hope that even though I'm not a fan of Mag, I've given you an idea of how to use her effectively, some of the niches of her skills, plus some ideas for builds so you can actually work on your own. I know some of you are going to get some really good use out of her, but honestly I know I'm not going to be one of them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Banshee Prime launches tomorrow, or today depending on time zones, so I'm going to have videos coming out on those things very, very soon. So for now, thank you all very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video.